I invited my parents over to celebrate my promotion: steak, wine, and homemade pie. But after dessert, my dad stood up, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Leave your keys. This house belongs to the family now." I thought it was a sick joke, until they tried to change my mortgage, steal my identity, and move in while I was at work. That night, I lost my family. But what did I do next? That's when I took everything back. I'm 32-year-old Amanda Collins, and 3 years ago I bought my first property. It was a little but lovely two-bedroom home that embodied all I had worked so hard to achieve. I celebrated my promotion by inviting my parents to dinner last Sunday. I never thought my father would want my house keys after dessert, his visage as icy as stone. He said, "This house belongs to the family now," and my mother gave a nod. I put the keys on the table and walked out in silence, feeling hurt and confused. Everything changed when the mortgage company contacted us the following morning. Please let me know where you're watching from in the comments section before I reveal how I learned about my parents' covert scheme. To find out what I did next, click the like button and subscribe if you've ever had family members violate your trust. Living under rigid regulations was a part of growing up in the Collins home. Thomas and Linda Carter, my parents, had complete control over my life, including what I could wear and who I could have as friends. They referred to it as defense. As I got older, though, I realized it was really control. I thought they loved me and wanted the best for me, even though they were very controlling. I simply felt that their strategies were harsh and out of date. I put a lot of effort into becoming independent after high school. I sought for scholarships behind their backs, even though they urged that I reside at home and attend the nearby community college. Although they expressed their dissatisfaction, they were unable to argue against free education when the acceptance letter from State University, which included a full academic scholarship, arrived. I was changed over those 4 years away. I became aware of my financial prowess and my enthusiasm for assisting others in prudent money management. I started my financial consulting career with Thomason Financial Group in an entry-level role. I took on extra assignments, put in absurd hours, and obtained certification after certification. By the time I was 29, I had saved enough money for a down payment on a house of my own and tripled my starting salary. My parents advised me to build an addition to their home, or, better yet, purchase a condo in their community. They hardly disguised their disgust when I bought my craftsman-style house across town instead. My father stated, "It's too much house for one person," at the housewarming. "You're wasting money on extra space," my mother said, denying that I was admiring the refinished hardwood flooring. To me, that house stood for security, achievement, and independence. On the weekends, I painted the walls, put in ceiling fans, and set up a home office where I frequently worked through the night. My haven was the backyard garden. My creative space is the kitchen. There was significance in every corner. It was more than just property. It was the tangible result of ending reliance patterns that had been established over generations. I was just promoted to senior consultant, which comes with a sizable pay increase and the opportunity to develop my own clientele. I had been covering senior colleagues' clients while they went on family holidays for 5 years, and now I was finally moving up the ladder. This milestone was to be commemorated with a celebration supper. In hindsight, I ought to have recognized the warning indicators. My father had become more detailed in his inquiries regarding my mortgage. What bank holds your loan? Is it a 15 or 30-year term? Did you refinance with these low rates? I assumed at the time that he was chit-chatting or perhaps thinking about refinancing their own house. My mother also changed how she behaved. Because their attic was too wet, she started requesting to store family heirlooms at my house. As though my home were an extension of theirs, she would place antique photo frames on my mantel and say, "These should stay in the family." Over the years, I had been kind to my parents. I sent payments when they said they were having trouble paying their property taxes. I paid for half of the replacement of their furnace when it died last winter. I never requested payment. After all, they were family. Even though he was 2 years younger than me, My brother Ryan was always there for my parents. He had a symbiotic connection with my parents, who provided inexpensive accommodation, he took care of home maintenance, and he reinforced their viewpoint. He was a contractor who continued to reside in an apartment above their garage. Ryan, in contrast to me, never questioned their judgment or questioned their authority. He always took their side in family arguments and would frequently remind me of the sacrifices made by our parents. Rachel, my closest friend, had repeatedly cautioned me. She remarked, "Your parents don't want you to succeed beyond them," after they sapped my enthusiasm for the promotion. They talk about family loyalty, but they're using that to keep you obligated to them. I told her that her worries were exaggerated and that my parents, for all their imperfections, wanted me to succeed in life. "Trust me," I answered her. "They're just old-fashioned. They'll come around when they see how stable my career is becoming." Rachel simply gave a headshake. "I hope you're right, but be careful how much you share with them. Information is power, and they've spent your whole life maintaining power over you." I ought to have paid closer attention to Rachel. I should have asked why my father wanted to check my house insurance policy to make sure you're getting a good rate, and why my mother insisted on keeping a spare key in case of emergencies. There were signs. However, the idea that family would never really betray you blinded me. How foolish I was. Preparing that Sunday supper took up my entire day. My mother preferred roasted garlic mashed potatoes with additional butter and a touch of rosemary, and I marinated steaks, which were my father's favorite. I even used my grandmother's recipe to make an apple pie from scratch. The fine china I hardly ever used was on the dining room table. A bottle of pricey Cabernet was breathing on the counter, and candles were lit. I wanted to show my parents that I had really succeeded, so this dinner was more than just a celebration of my promotion. Maybe now, instead of seeing me as the child they were still trying to manage and guide, they would regard me as a successful adult deserving of their respect. At about 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, adjusted my clothes, and smiled broadly as I opened the door. When I noticed my brother Ryan standing on the porch with my parents, my smile wavered. My mother said, "I hope you don't mind," and entered without waiting for an answer. Ryan didn't have any plans tonight, so we brought him along. "Of course not," I said while hurriedly figuring out if I had enough food for a guest. "The more the merrier." A bottle of cheap wine, the kind you buy at the grocery store checkout, was given to me by my father. Even though it had never been my favorite, he said, "Brought your favorite." The talk was limited to the appetizers. My mom made a comment about the new curtains in the living room and inquired about their cost and where I purchased them. After looking over the new backsplash I had put in the kitchen, my father pointed out a tiny patch of uneven grouting. As I served, Ryan remained silent, grinning at texts and checking his phone nonstop. When I thought it was time to convey my news, the main course had just been served. I started by filling their wine glasses and said, "I wanted to tell you all in person, which is why I arranged this dinner. I've been promoted to senior consultant at Thomason. It comes with a significant raise, my own office, and the chance to build my own client list." A beat too long passed in the ensuing stillness. At last, my mother said, "That's nice, dear. Will you have to work more hours? That doesn't seem healthy." After giving his steak a good chew, my father said, "How much more will you be making?" He glanced at my mother and his eyebrows went up a little as I told him. Finally, "Well, good for you," he said. "About time they recognized your work." Ryan gave a quiet snort. Must be nice to sit in an office all day for that kind of money. I pushed away the usual disappointment that was starting to sink in my gut. I'm really excited about the opportunities. I've worked really hard for this. My mother answered, "Yes, you always were focused on your career," in a tone that suggested a weakness in her character. The conversation was strained as the lunch went on. My parents talked about Ryan's recent bathroom renovation for a nearby restaurant for 15 minutes, but they didn't ask many questions regarding my promotion. As we went to dessert, I saw my father constantly checking his watch. In a dramatic change in attitude, my father sat up taller, as I brought him coffee and apple pie. "Amanda," he murmured in a rather formal tone. "Your mother and I have been thinking about your situation." "My situation?" I inquired, sincerely perplexed. Carefully setting his fork down, he nodded. "This house. It's too much for you, and frankly, it should be benefiting the entire family." The moment my coffee cup reached my lips, it froze. "What are you talking about?" "We've discussed it at length," my mother said. "As your parents, we've invested everything in you, your education, your upbringing, all the opportunities you've had. This success you're experiencing is a direct result of our investment." Ryan had a slight smile on his lips as he nodded along. "Your home," said my dad, "is essentially the result of family investment. We've decided it's time to recognize that officially." With my voice almost audible, I questioned, "What exactly are you saying?" My dad's expression stiffened. "We're saying that this house belongs to the family now. Your mother and I will be moving in, and Ryan will handle the renovations we've been planning." Ryan bent over. "I'm thinking we'll knock out that wall between the kitchen and dining room first. Open up the floor plan." Mom's always wanted an open concept. I glanced from person to person, waiting for someone to laugh, to expose this as some kind of complex, if cruel, joke. However, their faces stayed solemn. Expectant, even. "Slowly, this is my house," I said. "I bought it with my money. My name is on the deed and the mortgage." My dad gave me a contemptuous wave. "We're family. What's yours is ours. That's how it works." "No," I responded, raising my voice. "That's not how it works. I bought this house. I pay the mortgage. It's mine." My mother's face assumed the dejected look she had mastered over the years. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" "With selfishness." I repeated incredulously, "Selfishness. How is owning what I paid for selfish?" My father said, "Leave your keys and get out," as his voice rose. "This house belongs to the family now." My mother's lips formed a thin line as she nodded in agreement. "You can't be serious," I said. "Deadly serious," said my dad. "We'll give you a week to remove your personal items. Ryan will supervise to make sure you don't take anything that should stay with the house." I had the impression that I had entered a different reality. My family members were talking calmly about robbing me of my house, as though they were perfectly entitled to take. I was stunned and temporarily unable to speak. My father held out his hand in that startled silence. "Keys." Now, something became terribly silent and still inside of me. I took my house keys out of my purse, set them on the table, and got up without saying a word. I merely reached for my car keys, wallet, and phone. My father called as I made my way to the door, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. With tears clouding my vision, I shut the door behind me, got into my car, and drove across town to Rachel's apartment. After I told Rachel what had transpired, she said, "They've lost their minds. A lawyer is necessary for you. First thing tomorrow." "They're my parents," I murmured pathetically. "Some misunderstanding must exist." Rachel took hold of my shoulders. "Listen to me, Amanda. They just made an attempt to take your house. There is no miscommunication here. It is illegal." That night, as I lay awake on Rachel's couch, I kept playing back the dialogue from supper. Had I in any way suggested to them that the house was a family investment? Had I overlooked a crucial aspect of our relationship that would account for this strange conduct? Regardless of my analysis, I was unable to understand what had transpired. I had no idea that tomorrow's phone call would reveal the full scope of their treachery. I was confused and emotionally spent when I woke up on Rachel's couch. For a little moment of ecstasy, I forgot why I was there. Then the memories came flooding back, including my brother's arrogant plans for remodeling, my mother's virtuous nodding, and my father's icy stares. To my house. Rachel had already left a message telling me to phone an attorney and eat something before she left for work. My phone rang when I was looking through a list of real estate attorneys. Unknown figure. The voice was still rough from sleep when I said, "Hello, this is Amanda Collins." "Miss Collins, are you crying?" My thoughts were interrupted by a formal voice. This is Midwest Mortgage Services, David Herrera. I'm phoning you because of some strange activity with your mortgage account. My stomach grew constricted. What sort of activity? Yesterday afternoon, an attempt was made to modify the contact details on your account. They asked about co-borrowing the current mortgage as well. Because the request did not originate through our secure gateway, our system marked it as suspicious. My parents were attempting to take over my mortgage yesterday afternoon as I was making their dinner. David went on, our records show you as the sole owner and borrower of the property, even though the individuals claimed to be co-owners. I wanted to confirm this information with you directly. You're right, I affirmed, my thoughts racing. I am the sole proprietor. Who specifically attempted to implement these changes? Linda Carter and Thomas Carter. This was escalated to me rather than being rejected right away because they gave me some of your personal information, including your social security number. My social security number was in their possession. They did, of course. They were my parents. My birth certificate and other childhood documents were likely still in their possession. Are you giving these people permission to view your mortgage information, Miss Collins? Definitely not, I firmly stated. They are not entitled to my property or account. I get it. I'll instantly apply more security measures to your account. If someone is trying to obtain your financial information fraudulently, you might want to think about calling the police. I hung up and sat still on Rachel's couch as the situation's gravity set in. My parents had made a concerted effort to take over my mortgage through deceit, so this wasn't a miscommunication or an odd power struggle. I couldn't have predicted how deeply the betrayal would sting. I explained the scenario on the local police non-emergency number. If my parents still had the keys to the property, the officer inquired. Yes, I said. Last night, I left them there when they instructed me to go. He recommended that you meet with police at your home to see if anyone had entered without permission. We are able to record any possible unauthorized occupancy or break-in. 2 hours later, I was standing on my own front porch with 2 police officers, accessing the secret emergency key I kept in a magnetic box beneath the fender with Rachel's extra car key. I unlocked the door with shaky hands. The house was deserted. However, there were still traces of my parents. The dinnerware, now coated with dried food, remained on the table. I had left my house keys there, but they were gone. Nothing was visibly missing, according to a brief inspection, although several of the drawers in my home office were a little loose. While taking notes for her report, Officer Rodriguez stated, I would like to document that someone has been in your home and possibly accessed your personal information. I strongly advise getting your hair changed today. My phone rang again as she was giving me her card. It was a neighborhood legal practice. Is Amanda Collins here? A serene voice inquired. This is Mitchell Legal Services, Susan Mitchell. Regarding a property dispute, your buddy Rachel urged me to give you a call. An hour later, I was sitting in Susan's office, surrounded by framed diplomas and legal volumes. Her piercing eyes and no-nonsense manner instantly put me at ease, although she was in her 50s. She listened to my story and replied, let me get this straight. Your parents tried to alter your mortgage information without your knowledge or approval, requested your house keys, and claimed your property as family property. Yes, I said, still finding it hard to believe. And you've confirmed that all the paperwork shows you are the only owner? Does the mortgage have no co-signers? No family members have made any monetary donations toward the down payment. Not a single one. I personally saved money for the down payment. For the last 3 years, every mortgage payment has been deducted from my account. Susan took notes while nodding. I would like to conduct a thorough background investigation on your parents with your consent. Any case we construct may be strengthened if they have previously attempted this kind of deception. I agreed after only a moment's hesitation. Susan's investigator produced a concerning report in less than half an hour. Susan went over the data and said, your parents have serious financial issues. There are 3 credit cards that are past due. A 2-year-old tax lien. Additionally, it seems that they recently took out a second mortgage on their own house. She went on to say, they're in financial trouble. The image became glaringly obvious. My parents were desperate, not only domineering. It's possible that my recent raise and promotion persuaded them that giving up my house would help them with their financial issues. The fact that this isn't their first try at anything similar is what worries me the most, Susan added. 7 years ago, your maternal grandmother filed a complaint claiming that your parents tried to move her retirement assets into their names. Although the complaint was eventually dropped, the records are still there. Despite her distance, my grandmother had always been kind. My parents took care of all her affairs after she passed away 5 years ago. I now questioned what actually transpired between them. With the weight of treachery pressing down on my chest, I sobbed in Susan's office. My parents had a history of manipulating finances in addition to trying to take my house. I've been so blind. I know this is overwhelming, Susan said as she handed me a tissue box, but we need to act quickly to protect your assets. First, we'll send a formal cease and desist letter. Then, we'll file for a temporary restraining order to keep them away from your property while we sort this out. I had incoming text messages buzzing on my phone while I signed the required documents. My brother gave them to me. You're going overboard. Parents only want to assist you with household chores. Family members look out for one another. You've been self-centered all along. Dad says you're not allowed to attend family get-togethers if you bring lawyers in. Susan added the messages to her file when I presented them to her. It was classic manipulation tactics, she noted. They're trying to make you feel guilty for protecting your own property. Rachel was waiting outside to take me to a locksmith when I left the lawyer's office. She said, "You're staying with me until this gets sorted." "I can't impose on you like that," I muttered in defiance. "You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who actually cares about your well-being, not what they can take from you." Martin, my boss, called me that evening after I had changed all of my locks and put up credit monitoring alerts. With concern in his voice, he continued, "Amanda, I heard you're dealing with a family emergency." This startled me, so I said, "How did you know?" "Your father called the office, asking for your employment verification for some kind of family financial consolidation. When I told him we don't release employee information without written consent, he became quite agitated." "Is everything okay?" I gave a brief explanation, mortified that my family conflict had made it to my employment. Martin said, "Take whatever personal time you need, right away. Your job and promotion are secure. And I'll alert security not to allow your family members into the building." We hung up, and I looked at my voicemail. My father had left a menacing message. "Amanda, you're making a grave error. Your family is us. We are entitled to what belongs to you. You will regret fighting this." Susan got the message from me. "It strengthened our case for a restraining order," she responded. I was exhausted, yet I couldn't sleep. In Rachel's guest room, I lay awake and relived my whole parent-child relationship, challenging each memory, every conversation. Had they always been conditional in their love? Had I never been considered a daughter, but a resource? I was so overcome with anguish at the concept that I was having trouble breathing. I had decided by morning. In addition to taking legal precautions, I would do everything in my power to make sure my parents could never again harm me or anybody else. I had to stand my ground no matter how unpleasant it was. It was 2 days after the terrible meal that I came home with a locksmith and a policeman. Susan had told me to have official witnesses there and to document everything. I was there to see if anything had been stolen while I was away and the new locks had been put. I felt sick to my stomach as we drew into the driveway. "My parents' car," I muttered. "And my brother's truck. They shouldn't be here." Officer Wilson gave a nod. "Stay in your car until I check it out." I saw him approach my front door, knock, and introduce himself through the windshield. My father was there when the door opened, angry but unsurprised. Officer Wilson gestured for me to join them after we had a quick conversation. It seemed unusual to stroll up my own sidewalk. It was like approaching a stranger's house. As I arrived at the porch, I could see into the living room beyond my father. Ryan and my mom were moving my furniture around. In fact, they had shifted my couch to the wall across from it and were in the middle of removing the carefully selected artwork. Officer Wilson formally said, "Miss Collins has identified you as unauthorized occupants of her residence. Can you produce proof that you are legally permitted to be on this property?" My dad's chest was swollen. "We are her parents. This home belongs to the family." "Is your name on the mortgage or the deed?" Calmly, the officer inquired. "We're family, so we don't require that." My dad insisted. "This house was purchased thanks to our contribution to her achievement." Officer Wilson answered, "Sir, that isn't how property law operates. You have no right to enter or occupy this residence without the owner's permission unless your name appears on the legal documents." With tears already welling up in her eyes, my mother stepped forward. "How could you bring the police to your family, Amanda? This is not how we brought you up." I discovered my voice. "How are you able to attempt to take my house? You are a better parent than that." Ryan came out of the hallway with a box with what seemed like my private papers in it. "This is absurd. We're merely assisting with organization. By stealing my private documents, I put up a challenge." "Set that aside, Ryan." Officer Wilson interrupted. "Miss Collins, do you want these people taken off your property?" I firmly replied, "Yes," ignoring my mother's gasp. "And I would like to see what they have taken." One of the most awkward situations of my life ensued. My family had to leave my house under police supervision. My mother alternated between crying and cold silence as my father became more and more furious, mumbling nebulous warnings about family devotion and how I would regret this betrayal. Ryan shook his head and muttered that my true colors were finally coming out as he glared at me the entire time. When they eventually departed, I found that a number of items were missing. My grandma's jewelry trunk, my social security card and my birth certificate, financial records such as prior tax returns, and, strangely, a number of framed family pictures. Upon inspecting my home office, I discovered that someone had gained access to my computer. I couldn't determine right away what they might have taken or seen. I said to Officer Wilson, "I would like to report the stolen items." With empathy, he nodded. "A restraining order is something else you ought to think about. Family matters can quickly get out of hand." That prognosis turned out to be brutally accurate throughout the course of the following few days. In addition to my immediate family, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had obviously been given a skewed account of what happened sent me a flurry of accusing texts. "How could you throw your parents out of your house? Your parents gave you everything, and this is how you repay them." An uncle that I hardly knew sent me one message. There was no mention of their illegal invasion, but apparently my father had told everyone they had invested significantly in my house and that I was now stealing family property. Their attempted mortgage fraud goes unmentioned. The public attacks followed. On social media, my parents tagged mutual acquaintances and extended family, portraying themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. The public humiliation was unbearable, particularly when distant relatives and former classmates started making comments and expressing their displeasure with me without even seeking my opinion. I wrote a composed, truthful message to anybody who contacted me in private, thanks to Rachel's assistance. "I'm sorry you've been given incorrect information. My parents attempted to claim ownership of my home, which I purchased independently. This is now a legal matter, and I won't be discussing it further." Some instantly retreated. Others stepped up their demands that I work things out without lawyers and that family matters should stay private. The facts didn't seem to matter much. In the meantime, a certified letter from a lawyer my parents had hired was sent to Susan. It demanded mediation and stated that they had verbally agreed that my house was a family investment property. Susan remained unmoved. She reassured me, "Their claims have no legal merit." However, the strain was having an adverse effect. I had trouble falling asleep. I didn't eat much. Going to work turned into a show. I smiled on the outside while I was on the inside. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, fearing another assault. The porch light was broken when I got home one evening, and there was a letter on the doorframe. "Family takes care of its own." one way or another. The following morning, I went straight to Susan's office because of the implied threat. She made no hesitation. After looking over the police report I submitted on the note, she stated, "This goes too far. Their actions are becoming more and more alarming." Even though I understood how important legal protection was, I was still hesitant. Was it truly possible for me to cut off all contact with my family? I was reared by these individuals, who attended my graduation ceremonies. She appeared in all of the birthday and holiday pictures. Susan read my face and replied softly, "I know this is difficult. But consider this. Would you be reluctant to defend yourself if these individuals had been your friends or coworkers rather than your parents?" I never felt more alone than I did that night as I lay awake in my newly protected house, encircled by motion sensor lights and security cameras. I eventually acknowledged what I had been avoiding at around 3 in the morning. I didn't have the loving but flawed parents I believed I had. The individuals that attempted to break into my house were exposing their true selves to me, who they might have always been. Both sadness and clarity were brought about by the realization I could grieve for the family I believed I had while defending myself against the real one. I made an appointment with a family trauma specialist therapist the following morning. In order to deal with this betrayal, I required expert assistance. My credit monitoring software alerted me as I was heading to work. A credit card application had been made in my name. Since my parents' house was provided as the address, the application had been flagged. I sent Susan the warning. She said, "Identity theft is a serious crime." This greatly strengthens our case. We were notified of our court date for the restraining order hearing 2 days later. Susan started getting me ready for this. She cautioned, "They'll probably portray the loving, worried family. The judge will consider the facts, not feelings. Additionally, we have strong proof of their improper and possibly illegal behavior." I was scarcely able to function the night before the hearing. I felt physically sick at the thought of going to court with them, of publicly admitting their betrayal. Beneath the nervousness, however, was an increasing determination. I hadn't done anything incorrectly. All of my possessions were the result of hard work. I had a right to defend what was mine. I refused to give up, no matter how terrible it was. The antiseptic fluorescent lights, reverberating corridors, and marble columns of the county courthouse loomed. Susan and I came early, my hands shaking as I gripped my evidence portfolio in a conservative navy suit. "Remember to stick to the facts," Susan advised softly. "Avoid allowing them to elicit an emotional reaction." There was a well-planned appearance when my brother and parents came in with their lawyer. My father had a distinguished, albeit weathered, appearance. My mom looked frail, crying, holding onto her purse like a lifeline. Playing the part of the obedient son, Ryan stood guard next to them. They didn't even recognize me. Before quickly averting her gaze, my mother's eyes briefly locked with mine. Susan was approached by James Westfield, their lawyer, who presented a pre-hearing proposal. If Ms. Collins agrees to family counseling and gives her parents reasonable access to the property they help secure, my clients are willing to drop this whole unfortunate misunderstanding, he added with ease. Susan gave a frigid response. Your clients tried identity theft, personal document theft, unlawful access, and mortgage fraud. This is not a miscommunication. The motion for a restraining order is moving forward. We went into the courtroom when our case was called. A woman in her 60s with keen eyes, Judge Elena Martinez, silently went over the petition and then looked up. I am aware that this is a property ownership dispute within the family. Your Honor, Westfield cut in. This is just a breakdown in communication between a daughter and her well-meaning parents. The Collins family has traditionally shared resources for the benefit of all, functioning as a financial unit. Susan calmly and precisely started to lay out our evidence. The mortgage company's comment regarding the illegal access attempt. My parents were discovered in my house, according to the police report. Recording of the stolen goods. The menacing message. The effort at identity theft. Susan went on to say, "We have also found other instances in which Mr. and Mrs. Collins tried to extort money from Ms. Collins's grandmother in a similar manner." The lawyer for my parents protested right away, saying the earlier event was unimportant and had already been settled in private. My parents gave a tearful performance when it was their turn to reply, which was agonizing and upsetting to watch. Using a tissue to dab at her eyes, my mother stated, "We only wanted to help our daughter. She has always acted rashly when making financial decisions. Our goal was to safeguard the family's investment." "What kind of investment did the family make?" Judge Martinez inquired sharply. "Did you make a monetary contribution toward the purchase of this house?" "Not directly," my father acknowledged, "but we brought her up, taught her, and shaped her into the person she is today. Our sacrifices are the source of everything she is." Although the judge's expression stayed neutral, her inquiries about financial transactions, court records, and the chronology of events grew more detailed. The story of my parents became more complex with each response. Judge Martinez questioned Ryan directly about the box of documents he was carrying when the police arrived, even though he claimed in his testimony that he was just helping organize some paperwork. He asserted those were family papers. "Are Ms. Collins's name and social security number on tax returns considered family documents?" the judge questioned doubtfully. Judge Martinez had heard enough by the end of the hearing. "My brother and parents are not allowed to be within 500 feet of my house or place of employment for the next 90 days after she granted the temporary restraining order. There seems to be a troubling pattern of attempted financial control and possibly fraudulent activity based on the evidence presented," she said. "Ms. Collins is entitled to defend the property she has lawfully acquired." My mother yelled behind me as we walked out of the courtroom. "Please, Amanda, we are your family." I continued to walk. Susan placed a reassuring hand on my elbow. Relief should have resulted from the legal victory. Rather, it sparked a fresh round of family conflict. Our extended family became sharply divided as word of the restraining order spread like wildfire. The majority supported my parents, believing that my legal action betrayed their loyalty. But to my surprise, my mother's sister, Aunt Karen, reached out with a very different message. "I've been waiting years for someone to stand up to them," she said when we met for coffee. "They did something similar to your grandmother, you know. Tried to convince her she was incapable of managing her finances and nearly took control of her accounts. I intervened, and they've barely spoken to me since." "What kept you from telling me?" I asked, stunned. "Would you have believed me?" She countered gently. "We want to believe the best of our parents. It's how we survived childhood." And Karen's support was a lifeline in an otherwise hostile family environment. But my brother's behavior grew increasingly alarming. Despite the restraining order, neighbors reported seeing his truck parked near my house, always far enough away to avoid technical violation, but close enough to feel threatening. Then came the notes, left anonymously in my mailbox. "Family sticks together. Blood is thicker than water. You can't hide behind lawyers forever." I reported every incident to the police, but without proof of who left them, there was little they could do. The stress began to affect my work. Despite Martin's support, I was making uncharacteristic errors, missing details, forgetting client calls. The promotion I'd fought for was slipping through my fingers. Susan urged me to install additional security measures. "Your parents and brother may be escalating because the legal system didn't give them what they wanted," she explained. "Sometimes this kind of behavior gets worse before it gets better." I installed a comprehensive home security system, changed my phone number and email, created special filters to block contact from known family accounts. I even began varying my commute and checking under my car before driving. They were precautions that felt paranoid, but they gave me peace of mind. Then, 3 weeks after the restraining order, I discovered someone had attempted to access my bank accounts online. The login attempt triggered a lockout. The IP address traced back to my parents' home. Susan added the incident to our growing case file. "They're not respecting the spirit of the restraining order," she said. We need to show there are serious consequences. The final straw came when a client mentioned receiving a disturbing email about me, supposedly from a concerned family member. The message painted me as mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. Similar emails had gone to several clients and to Martin. Fortunately, Martin saw through it. "This crosses every boundary," he said, forwarding the email. "Our legal team will pursue this as defamation against an employee." With that new evidence, Susan filed for a permanent restraining order, adding claims of defamation, harassment, and ongoing attempted fraud. The second hearing came quickly. This time, I entered the courtroom with less fear and more righteous anger. My parents' actions had escalated from control to outright sabotage. They weren't just trying to reclaim something, they were trying to destroy me. Judge Martinez remembered the case and reviewed the new evidence with visible concern. "This pattern of escalation is deeply troubling," she said. "What began as a property dispute has evolved into a coordinated campaign of harassment." My father's indignant denials fell flat in the face of digital evidence linking the defamatory emails to their home computer. My mother's tears now seemed rehearsed rather than genuine. Even their attorney looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor," my father interrupted during Susan's presentation, "this is all being blown out of proportion. We're just trying to help our daughter, who clearly isn't thinking clearly." Judge Martinez fixed him with a stern gaze. "Mr. Collins, I suggest you allow your attorney to speak for you. Your interventions are not helping your case." When Ryan testified, his justification for being near my home was inadequate. "I was just checking on my sister's property, making sure everything was okay." Despite the restraining order prohibiting you from coming within 500 feet of that property, the judge asked. "Family obligation trumps court papers," Ryan replied. His actual perspective finally showed through. "That is not how the law works, Mr. Collins," Judge Martinez remarked firmly. The judge approved the permanent restraining order, extending protections for 2 years. She also delivered a harsh warning. Criminal charges will follow any additional infractions. The court treats attempted fraud and harassment very seriously. Family ties do not shield anyone from legal repercussions. Ryan stood up abruptly when the decision was made public. "This is nonsense," he yelled. "She is abandoning her family. We owe her." Judge Martinez commanded, "Restrain your client." "Contempt of court," she added as the bailiffs drew closer. "In order to think about proper courtroom conduct, Mr. Collins will spend the night in the county jail. Justice should have been served when I saw my brother being taken away in handcuffs. Rather, it made me feel incredibly depressed. How did we arrive here? Due to greed, hatred, and entitlement, the family I grew up with had changed into someone I didn't know and didn't want to know." Susan touched my shoulder as we walked out of the courthouse. "When family betrays you, it's never easy," she remarked. "But you've shown incredible strength in handling this." My strength was lacking. I felt empty inside, weary, emotionally damaged after experiencing sadness and anxiety for months. The court case may have been over. However, the battle of the emotions was far from done. After 3 months, I was starting over. Regular security precautions were in place. Attacks of panic were less common. My productivity at work has leveled out. I was at last starting to reap the rewards of my promotion. Next, the text. From an unidentified number. "Let's have a conversation. Tomorrow, have coffee at Sterling's." "Dad." My heart pounded. I sent it on to Susan. "The restraining order is technically violated," she acknowledged. "But it's not worth pursuing unless they continue. It's sometimes preferable to save your emotional energy. They might be pushing the envelope." My parents' lawyer sent a formal letter a week later suggesting a family reconciliation meeting at a neutral venue, with both attorneys in attendance. I cautiously consented after talking it over with Dr. Eleanor, my therapist. She told me during our session, "You've done outstanding work processing this trauma. Regardless of the result, meeting them from your position of strength might bring closure." A nearby restaurant's private room served as the venue for the meeting. Susan came with me. My parents brought Patricia Wong, a family mediation specialist, with them. In some way, they appeared smaller. Not as scary. My dad was lighter. I didn't realize how much gray my mother's hair had become. Like pious schoolchildren, they sat rigidly across the table with their hands clasped in front of them. My father formally said, "Thank you for agreeing to meet. We've had time to consider what we did." What came next wasn't really an apology. Although they admitted to misunderstandings and poor communication, they did not fully accept responsibility for the harassment, attempted theft, and emotional harm they had inflicted. My mother claimed we only wanted what was best for the family. Perhaps we were wrong with our methods. Misled, I said it again, trying to maintain my cool. You attempted to take my house, stole my private papers. Identity theft attempt. Attempted to harm my reputation in the workplace. Those are crimes, not faulty tactics. My dad's mouth clenched. We acknowledge our faults. What more would you like? Real responsibility, I answered. Understanding what you actually did and why, with the guarantee that it won't occur again. To myself or to anybody else. Susan swiftly retorted that accountability was necessary for any genuine reconciliation when their lawyer recommended that we focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on past grievances. As the heated discussion went on, it became evident that they wanted the restraining order to be removed and my life to be returned, but they didn't really admit the damage they had caused. Instead of being the domineering, manipulative conduct they truly were, they presented their acts as misinterpreted attempts to assist. With tears in her eyes, my mother continued, "We are your parents. Families ought to be forgiving. Honesty is necessary for forgiveness," I stated. And it doesn't necessarily imply that trust has been restored. They suggested family therapy, which all four of us would attend together, and acknowledged that Ryan was still upset, but said he was working through his feelings. I gave their proposition great thought. Finally, I stated, under certain circumstances, I'm open to continued communication. Complete acceptance of the facts, no minimization or euphemisms. Before any group sessions, each of you should have individual therapy. No talking about my money or my property at all. Those things are forever off the table. My dad's expression hardened. So you now have the authority to set the parameters of our relationship? I clarified, I get to set boundaries. Whether or not you can respect them is up to you. There was no resolution at the end of the meeting. Although they claimed to think about my requests, it was clear from their body language that they didn't think they were realistic. Susan gave me a nod of approval as we made our way to our automobiles. You were fair, forceful, and unambiguous. They now have the ball in their court. 2 days later, I got a letter from my parents. It was a personal note written by my mother, not from their lawyer. There was no apology in it, just a declaration. Perhaps it would be best if we stopped communicating if you are unable to forgive and forget without restrictions. You know where to find us when you're ready to rejoin this family without all of these legal barriers. The message was unmistakable. They refused to accept responsibility for their conduct. I was the issue in their view. Oddly, the letter brought clarity and peace instead of destruction. I brought it to Dr. Eleanor's subsequent appointment. They are revealing their true selves to you, she said. Your cooperation and relinquishment of boundaries are necessary for their interpretation of family. So what? I inquired. My parents are still with me. At this point, you determine what kind of relationship, if any, is healthy for you, she said. Family can be about respect and support for one another, or it can be about biology. Occasionally, those overlap. They don't always. I consciously decided in the weeks that followed that I would no longer attempt to change a family dynamic that only I was willing to change. I was more focused when I went back to work. I got back in touch with friends I had lost touch with throughout the crisis. I found a great deal of understanding and affirmation when I joined a support group for individuals who are estranged from their family. My house needed to be reclaimed. It had been a place of pride before becoming a battlefield. After a long delay, I finally hired contractors to rebuild the kitchen. I painted the walls again. Furniture was rearranged. Put new pieces of art that reflected me in place of the ones my parents had attempted to remove. With every modification, the property felt genuinely mine once more, and the memory of their transgression was lessened. I feel more at ease now that I have a smart security system installed. Slowly, the ongoing anxiety of seeing Ryan's truck or receiving another menacing note subsided. I got a surprise promotion 6 months after the last court hearing. I was summoned to Martin's office. Everyone in upper management was impressed by the way you handled yourself during that family crisis, he remarked. You demonstrated professionalism and fortitude in the face of tremendous pressure. Our new director of client services must possess those exact attributes. I didn't miss the irony. My family's own crises, which was intended to make me less independent, had actually made me stronger. They had attempted to manipulate me. However, in doing so, they made me mature beyond their grasp. Rachel and a few others invited me to join them in celebrating the holidays, which are a time of great anguish for those who are alienated. Rachel asserted that chosen family is still family. It's the healthier version sometimes. It felt weird to spend my first Thanksgiving without my brother and parents, but not as bad as I had thought. For the first time in years, I was genuinely enjoying the holiday because I was surrounded by individuals who understood and respected my boundaries. Eggshells weren't present. No little critiques. No strain hidden behind phony grins. My brother and I had not seen each other since the courthouse until we met at the grocery store in early December. He was the first to notice me. A scowl tightened on his face after it registered disbelief. I braced myself for conflict. However, he chose to walk in the opposite direction and turn his cart around instead. Something fundamental had changed, as evidenced by his withdrawal rather than his aggression. Several members of my extended family who had initially supported my parents sent me holiday cards later that month. The messages were polite but cautious, admitting that they might have been duped. I was invited to Aunt Karen's New Year's party. She whispered softly, "They won't be attending. They've destroyed too many relationships. They have alienated more people than simply you." As the new year got underway, I came to a profound realization. I had stepped beyond an imperceptible boundary. A deep sense of liberation and sporadic grief has taken the place of my ongoing worry about my family. I didn't need their blessing anymore. I was no longer afraid of their opinion. I could just be who I was. I discovered that looking at my family's faces one evening while going through old pictures didn't hurt me right away. I was able to recognize the patterns that have always existed while also acknowledging the pleasant memories. I said to Dr. Eleanor, "It's like mourning someone who's still alive." I'm grieving for the parents I believed I had while coming to terms with their true selves. That's a significant difference, she stated. It enables you to respect both your positive and negative experiences without discounting either. I started dating again in the spring. I met Ethan, a landscape architect, through friends, and he was patient and friendly. He listened intently when I eventually told him my situation, without passing judgment or offering unwanted counsel. "Family is complex," he stated plainly. "I'm impressed by your handling of it." I was able to establish a connection based on honesty rather than a staged version of my life thanks to his calm support. I wasn't trying to hide the truth about my past for the first time, and it was liberating. I thought about everything that had changed as the 1-year anniversary of that awful Sunday drew near. Although I had lost my biological family, I had acquired strength, connection, and clarity. I had not only taken back my house, but also my independence, my personal space, and my voice. The last step was to write a letter. I wrote a letter, but I never mailed it. It conveyed what I had learned and was addressed to my parents. I now realize that a true family encourages rather than dictates your personal development. Boundaries are respected by true families, not crossed. Instead of being alarmed by your achievement, true family embraces it. I found it elsewhere because I deserved better than what you provided. Not to forget, But to honor and let go of that chapter of my life, I read the letter out loud to myself and then put it in a box with old family photos and mementos. I had made it through the betrayal of my family, and I had come out stronger, smarter, and more real. Their demand for the house keys on Sunday night had come to represent a more profound reality. The keys to my life are in my hands, and I'll never give them up to someone who doesn't appreciate my freedom to utilize them however I see fit. I was free a year after that terrible Sunday. I had a housewarming party to celebrate my home's full refurbishment a year after I took it back. With shiny quartz countertops, new cabinets, and a layout that flowed with purpose, the kitchen now had the open idea my brother had originally imagined, but done according to my specifications. New hardwood floors ran the length of the main level, and the living room had been colored a calming sage green. Each modification was an intentional act of reclamation, turning a traumatized area into a haven. Rachel brought a house-shaped ornament etched with Amanda's haven and arrived early to assist with last-minute preparations. She hung the ornament on a potted fir beside the doorway and declared, "It's officially been a year. How are you feeling?" After a moment, I answered, lighter. Like I finally set down something heavy that I had been carrying around for the rest of my life without realizing it. It was attended by Aunt Karen, coworkers, pals from my support group, and even Susan, who was now more than just my lawyer. In sharp contrast to the tense family holidays of my past, the house was alive with laughing and chatter. My road to recovery had not been a straight one. Grief would still surprise me sometimes, whether it was a childhood song on the radio, an old birthday card written love always, mom and dad, or just passing their neighborhood. But I was no longer sidetracked by those moments. I had learned how to sit with pain without letting it dominate me with Dr. Eleanor's assistance. Instead of putting up with behavior that made me feel inferior, I learned to spot warning signs in relationships, both personal and professional, and to confront discomfort early. My boundaries were respected by those who stayed in my life. Naturally, those who didn't screen themselves out. I was challenged and inspired by the increased duties that came with being promoted to Director of Client Services. I started coaching more junior coworkers, particularly those dealing with challenging home situations. One junior consultant, Emily, told me, "You gave me hope to see how you've succeeded in spite of family strife. You helped me confront my parents about my career." The overall outline of my story had spread, even though I never disclosed all the specifics of my family situation at work. I was surprised to find that it was a source of connection rather than shame. Eventually, I was requested to co-lead a community support group for adults dealing with family separation. I sat in a circle twice a month with folks who knew the importance of holidays, the pain of betrayal, and the bravery of choosing peace over closeness. I frequently reminded the group that family estrangement is not a failure. There are instances when it's the healthiest choice you can make. I saw my brother at the hardware shop 3 months after the housewarming. Across the paint aisle, our gazes locked. His expression stiffened. This time he came toward me, tight-jawed and aggressive, rather than avoiding me. "Mom has been ill," he stated bluntly. "You wouldn't give a damn." Although the charge hurt, I maintained my composure. "That's unfortunate to hear. I'm hoping she's receiving quality care." "You care now," he raised his voice. "After shattering the family." I whispered, "Ryan, this isn't the place." "It has no place here," he yelled. "Because you put lawyers ahead of your family." Then he left his basket among the paint chips and turned to leave. I was shaken by the experience, but it also made me realize that I had made the right decision. I would always be the bad guy in his story because I was defending myself. I periodically received reports from Aunt Karen. My parents' financial difficulties had gotten worse. Once more, they had refinanced. The possibility of downsizing existed. My dad had started working part-time. To anyone who would listen, my mother would often vent. "They continue to blame you," Jessica stated plainly. "According to them, you owe them. Their retirement plan was to be your success." However, I experienced something much more nuanced than joy at their hardships, regret for what might have been, and relief that I was no longer caught up in their mayhem. During this time, my own relationship with money changed. I started dismantling ingrained beliefs, equating money with worth, concealing achievement out of shame, and feeling compelled to contribute more than I could afford, while working with a financial therapist in addition to Dr. Eleanor. My financial therapist reminded me that money is really a tool and not a gauge of one's worth, and not something you have to provide to others merely because they ask for it. I developed a methodical donating strategy, promoting things I felt strongly about rather than caving into pressure. When it comes to lending to friends and family, I establish explicit guidelines. I stopped being philanthropic out of guilt. The biggest change may have been in my relationship with Ethan. Ethan respected my limits without inquiry, in contrast to previous partners who had deemed my family background too complicated, or who had pushed me to make amends for the sake of peace. He once remarked, "Your family experience is a part of you, but it doesn't define you. You've used it to create something lovely." His own family was close-knit but healthy, devoid of covert power struggles and supportive of adult liberty. I expected hostility when I first joined them for a holiday get-together. However, it never materialized. I witnessed sincere love, constructive disagreement. Boundaries are respected without grudges. "Is this how your family is all the time?" Later, I asked Ethan. "Like what?" "All right, practical. No coercion. No mysterious comments. Don't leave so quickly." He chuckled until he realized I was being serious. "Amanda, that's how family should be. Not smothering, but supportive. Unconditional love." As we grew closer, I started to see a future in which I would have my own family, something I had previously dreaded because I wasn't sure I would follow the same patterns. However, therapy and introspection helped me realize that awareness was my defense. I could and would make a different decision. I composed a letter to myself on the anniversary of the restraining order. To honor my own power, not to rejoice over a court decision. You made it through the unthinkable. You safeguarded not just your house, but also your self-respect, personal space, and voice. You learned that respect for one another, rather than blood, defines true family. You discovered that limits are survival, not selfishness, and that forgiveness does not necessitate reconciliation. Above all, you discovered your voice, and the guts to put it to use. I store the letter in the drawer of my bedside table. It serves as a reminder of my accomplishments on difficult days. The actual definition of ownership had changed. It was more than just property and actions. It was about taking control of my life, my decisions, my principles, and my freedom to choose who may enter my house and my heart. My parents attempted to seize what I had created. By doing this, they provided me with something more potent, evidence that I am the only one with the keys to my future. In the support group, in therapy, and even in casual conversations, the subject of forgiveness was frequently brought up. People believed that healing required forgiveness. Something more subtle was recommended by my experience. I was accepted. I was free of the bitterness that tainted my daily existence. However, without regret or change, forgiveness, at least the type that repaired a relationship, felt out of place. Dr. Eleanor once remarked, "Perhaps forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You don't have to invite someone back into your life to let go of your anger." I found serenity in that distinction. From a distance, I could send my parents my best wishes. Without sacrificing myself once more, I hope they were able to find recovery. Recognize the positive aspects of my youth without using them as a justification for the negative effects of maturity. I started thinking about the contradiction of it all as a new year got underway. My family had given me something invaluable in an attempt to seize what was rightfully mine. The guts to define family according to my own standards. The discernment to create a life that is consistent with my truth. The ability to turn treachery into fortitude. Sitting in the sanctuary I had created one peaceful evening, I started to consider how I may relate this experience to others, those going through comparable losses, choices, and uncertainties. One option was the support group. However, there might have been others. What does the term family actually mean? Is it the quality of connection, respect, and caring, or is it biology and legal ties that define it? How can we respect our need to fit in without compromising who we are? There are no easy answers to these questions. However, pursuing them brought me to this point, to a life that is more genuine, happy, and self-defined than I ever thought was possible. I encourage you to leave a comment below if this tale struck a chord with you. Have you ever been forced to decide between closeness and tranquility? Between belonging and boundaries? What guided you along that route? For more inspirational tales of resiliency, recovery, and self-discovery, kindly like and subscribe. Know this no matter where you are in your journey. Relationships that respect your value are something you deserve. Peace is something you deserve. You deserve to live your life as you see fit. And that's how I turned betrayal into strength and loss into growth. In the end, the best revenge wasn't anger, it was peace. Living well, setting firm boundaries, and choosing myself over chaos became the most powerful answer. If you're dealing with betrayal, know this: you don't need to fight to win. Sometimes, walking away with your dignity is the real victory. Heal, grow, protect your peace. Have you ever faced a moment like this, when someone you trusted crossed the line? Share your story in the comments. What helped you rise above the pain?